Hey guys, this is our day 3 of Daniel and the Lion's Den. So remember, we have been talking about lions and how fierce they are, and how that maybe we've seen lions at the zoo or in on TV. We talked about a man who had a close encounter with lions in the Bible. So we've been talking about Daniel and about how when he was young, he and some of his friends were taken to a faraway land and they ended up working for a king. And remember, the king tried to make them eat certain foods, but God had commanded them not to eat them to keep them safe. And so Daniel was so brave that he stood up for what he believed, and he asked the king if he could eat his own food. He and his friends could abstain from the king's meat and eat their own food. And so the king agreed, and Daniel and his friends ended up being healthier than ever. All right, and so Daniel learned through this that it's always good to obey God no matter what. When Daniel grew up and he was older, he became an important helper for King Darius. Daniel was the second in command. Some of the other leaders were jealous of Daniel. They didn't like that the king liked him so much. They were always looking for something that he was doing wrong so they could go tell on him, but they could never find anything that he did wrong. Daniel went to his house 3 times a day to pray to God, and these men figured out that the only way they could trip him up would be to forbid him to pray. The bad leaders went to the king and told him he needed to make a new law that everyone needed to only pray to him for the next 30 days, and anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into a lion's den. King Darius agreed to the law, and it made it so. When Daniel heard this, he knew he would have a tough decision to make. Daniel would never stop praying to God, no matter what. So just like he did every other day, he went to his room to pray 3 times a day. And of course, the bad leaders were watching him. The bad men went to the king and told him that Daniel had broken the law, and the king was so upset because he would have to follow through with his new rule. But he really liked Daniel. He didn't want him to be thrown in the lion's den. But the king had to obey and give the order, so Daniel was arrested and thrown into the lion's den. We're going to find out what happens to Daniel tomorrow.